And we also invested in a company called Lumosity, which actually built a middleware for managing the EV infrastructure, which got acquired by ABB in 2 years actually. So that's some of the investments. And coming to ESDM, we have invested in a company called Simyok, which simulates EMI EMC issues from electronic design, without the need for building prototypes and taking it to the chamber and making measurements. So these are some of the investments. There are some more in the aviation sector, but okay, I'll stick to this aerospace.
Great, thanks, Suri, for getting us started. So let's hear from you. What's your portfolio like in this space?
Sure. So we are close to a $75 million fund, a deep tech and AI fund. And we have from this current fund, we have around 16 investments, and we are very closely tied to the IIM incubator as well. It was previously called CIA.co, now it's called IMA Ventures. So from our fund directly, and there are three spaces that we typically invest in. One category, which is the largest category, is advanced software and AI, right? It probably requires no specific explanation. A bunch of Indian startups are in that sector. We have investment in hard tech, and the last category is more into deep science, which takes like years of technology development, IP development, either from the academic institutions or research lab to come up with a product. So from our current fund, we have not invested in aerospace as yet. Even though from our incubator, we have taken a couple of bets in the space tech area. So companies like Agnikul, Bellatrix, we have co-invested with Vishnu actually in those. In terms of ESDM, we have taken bets in I would say two companies. So one is a company called Portal, Portl, which is essentially a very high-end smart mirror, right? But just the hardware play alone doesn't help. You got a lot of content play and so forth. And this is kind of a mirror which watches you while you exercise, you do your Zumba dancing and so forth, and is able to trace your form, your shape, if you're doing it right, and gives you very constructive feedback. A lot of real sense cameras and so forth out there. The second company we've invested is a company called PlayShifu, which has a lot of electronics on the hardware side and a phygital kind of an experience, which means the experience, the gamification that actually happens on the tablet upfront. We have not invested directly in the clean mobility space as yet, but we have probably looked at more than a couple of dozen companies in that space. My prior role, I was MD of analog devices. We had incubated a bunch of companies, helped a couple of companies, and one of the prime ones that I have personally got associated with our good friend Venki now as the president. This is a company called Astron. We had incubated this company way back in 2015.
Thanks, so great to hear that you're involved in this for almost a decade and more, especially nurturing new startups over here. Let's turn now to Vishnu. Vishnu, we just heard from Som that he's co-invested in one startup with you. Can you share with us some more details about this and the other startups in your portfolio?
Vishnu. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me over. I'm Vishnu. I work with Special Invest. Special is a deep science, deep tech focused fund. For the current fund, we are investing out of a $40 million fund, getting towards the tail end of the fund investments. The next fund is getting ready as well. We typically invest across 5 thematic areas. Space tech is one of them, which is where we invested with Som was referring to. So Agnikul, Galaxy, Inspacity, Astrogate Labs, Kava Space. So it's kind of like the largest space tech portfolio in the country. The second thematic area which we focus on relevant to clean mobility that we are discussing over here is the climate tech area. Within the subsector, we have invested in Ultraviolet, which is an electric superbike company. Aviation and clean mobility combined, we have invested in the E-Plane company, which is an electric air taxi company based out of IIT Madras. These two learnings also enabled us to look into the battery side of things. So we have invested in Eternal Energy, which is focusing more on the the architecture of cell design itself, and not on the battery pack, which is where a lot of the innovations in India are happening, but we have focused more on the cell design as such with Eternal. We also have investments in green hydrogen electrolyzer. There is a battery recycling company, Metastable Materials, and then a couple of other climate investments as well. The third thematic area is very relevant to the electronic side. So we usually refer it as advanced manufacturing and industrial technologies. There we have investments in a robotics company called Seinler, where they make the software and hardware required for make manufacturing automation possible. Also have investments in two semiconductor companies, Morphing Machines, which is making the first reconfigurable chip in India, and then Mindgroove Technologies, which recently tapered out the first system on chip from India. We also invest in advanced computing and software, and also into biotech and life sciences, but I'm just not mentioning the names because less relevance to the team.
Great, thanks, Vishnu. We talked a lot about EVs and batteries just now. So the next question to all of you is about EVs, definitely. I think all of us have noticed in the past few years an explosion of two-wheelers, maybe some three-wheelers, four-wheelers in electric space. So where are we in terms of the EV journey in India? Are we out of the bubble phase? Are we seeing some real solid traction and movement on the ground? Let's start with you, Vishnu.
Great. Thanks so much, Madan. So in my previous life, I was also working with Misilio, which was a clean mobility electric EV vehicle focused fund. See, I'll give you my perspective, right? India has seen multiple waves of mobility innovations that has happened. The first one started with ride sharing, digitalizing, etc. We saw that on the passenger side, we saw that on the logistics side as well, and then came the electrification side of things. The last few years has been mostly about setting up fundamental infrastructure required for the electrification technologies to grow upon. So if you look into whatever we have seen in the past, it has mostly been OEM companies, heavy charging companies, etc., building on what's happening. Not every one of them who would be categorized as a traditional VC investment space, but we have seen a lot of innovations happening in that space. Consolidation has started happening. If you see into the two-wheeler market, for example, at some point I had counted like 250, 300 two-wheeler EVs, OEM players in startup players in India, 2-3 years ago. That has now consolidated, and in terms of capital, in terms of who is getting the market share, etc., we are seeing very decent trends. But that being said, the higher form factors, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, etc., are yet to take place. Whether there is an opportunity for a startup to build or not is something which we are yet to see, because if you're seeing into four-wheeler passenger market, we are only seeing incumbents like Tata's and the others coming and doing it. Are startups emerging? We don't know. The opportunity has always been consolidated. I mean, at least the startup opportunity has been perceived to be consolidated around or focused around the logistics market, which is a very growing market. Even though it's only 15% of the vehicles in India, it's still a very fast growing market. And that's where a lot of people are working as well. We are seeing innovations happening over there. I wouldn't call it a bubble. It's what is required. It's a future of mobility. So whatever we are going through is just natural cycles of ups and downs. And we are moving into more stable. We are seeing more business model innovations coming up as well.
Thanks, Vishnu, for separating out the incumbents who are in the market already and where startups can be coming. And this is definitely not a bubble. Thanks. Some people have been saying it's a bubble, but I'm glad you mentioned there may be some cycles, but it's not a bubble at all. Let's talk to Som now. Som, what's your take on the EV industry? What trends are we seeing? I notice we have a couple of faculty members also in this space logging in from the chat window. So, you're on mute, Som.
Sorry, Vishnu has covered it very well, summarizing, right, how, but see, overall, I think this is kind of my take, being a deep tech investor. I think what we are seeing essentially is, of course, 250 to 300 different EV bike companies, the scooter companies and so forth. There's definitely a lot of three-wheelers, four-wheelers. It's very few from a startup standpoint, right? Hardly a couple of them. Now, what we are also seeing that, see, except for probably ultraviolet, ether energy, and so forth, right? The incumbents are obviously kind of at least strongly present, right? Except for these two, three other startups, incumbents have strongly gone in, or they have acquired many of the two-wheeler companies and kind of went into the foray. I think from a startup perspective, it remains to be seen how, from an sheer innovation standpoint, can we kind of create the Tesla out of India? Yes, I think Ather is probably a prime example from that standpoint. Can we create a four-wheeler? Yes, we can definitely do it. But what happens is the amount of capital it takes, the capex it takes, and so forth, that kind of, to a certain extent, the traditional VCs, right? The specialist VCs, kind of like Vishnu has come in, but many of the standard financial VCs, they don't jump in because it's a capex heavy business, right? It's a longish lead time. So what is happening today in the venture capital industry is a lot of family offices, strategic investors are filling that part in terms of capital. But I think, what we have seen is a lot of EV companies, two-wheeler companies. We have seen kind of battery pack manufacturers. We have seen few components from motors to battery management solutions and so forth. We probably saw just a very few actual cell companies, right? Coming up with new kind of cell pieces, and this is where I think the challenge is, because it requires a substantial, tens of millions, not hundreds of millions of investment to get kind of real cell technology out into commercial production. So those are the challenges. But I'm still, we need to now also look at, I mean, if you guys follow, I think Toyota came up with a latest update from a hydrogen fuel standpoint. They've created an engine which runs on multiple fuels together, right? So I am of this, while the EV revolution is happening, I think I'm a firm believer that finally the holy grail is hydrogen, right? So at least for the bigger size vehicles and so forth, freight trains, the trucks and so forth, I believe that is also the future. So we should not be just looking at, we need to be looking at clean mobility, not just EV.
Thanks, Som, for bringing up those two issues about hybrid and hydrogen vehicles. Suri, what's your take? You've also invested in a couple of startups in this space. How's EV going to be shaping out for the startups in the audience?
Yes, see, I too have seen a couple of EV truck startups. Okay, and as so mentioned, yeah, it's beyond our capability to invest because of the capex requirement, right? So, and also the other thing actually is that people have started working on like beyond the charging, right? Like vehicle charging and then the grid, right? So there are technologies which actually are coming up to solve the grid problem also, right? So that is where things are going. And actually, like just yesterday, I think Government of India released a policy of 10,900 crores subsidy kind of thing for e-buses and things like that. So it's surely not a bubble yet. Okay, that's what I would say.
Great. Thanks, Suri. So we've completed about 2 rounds of questions now. I've got 2 more questions for a panelist on specific verticals. I'm going to talk about defense and then space. Then we'll get into some more broader ecosystem questions. Thanks to all those people who are sharing information in the chat window about what you do, which company you're from, and so on. My next question for a panelist is about the defense sector. Now, many startups are getting into the defense sector, but it's a bit of a more tough nut to crack. It's a different culture, it's a different way of communication, contacts, security protocols, and so on. So my question for the panelists now is, what's been your experience with getting startups into the defense sector, and are there any tips, opportunities you can point them towards? Let's start with you, so.
Yeah, so, I mean, frankly speaking, we have not invested directly in the defense sector, right? And the reasons for that is multifold. Again, I mean, I myself was selling to the defense sector when I was with Analog Devices. So burned my fingers as well, right? Selling to all the government agencies, the labs and so forth. It was not easy. Uh, but things obviously changed drastically as well, right? With India's indigenization aspect, the entire Make in India. If you look at the type of companies, I mean, look at data patterns. They went public. It's a fantastic valuation and so forth. By the way, data patterns was my customer. So again, it's definitely a big shift, a big change, right? Obviously, many of these conditions, whenever look at the risks as well from an investor standpoint. When you have only a kind of captive customer, right? You can sell only to the Indian defense, and you cannot maybe even go out and sell to other countries, right? Because it's considered kind of very India specific. It becomes a challenge, right? So what I typically prefer is if we can do some kind of a dual use technology, right? Where you're selling to the defense, but also some kind of a commercial aspect, non-military aspect. That is kind of a fantastic aspect, right? Now, what we are seeing though, because of the newfound love for in defense production, indigenization, and so forth in India, multiple defense-focused funds are also coming up, right? So they have, some of them have been started up by former government, defense professionals and so forth as well. So they at least have a good set of foray and so forth into these labs. But there are risks because you are dependent on a single customer, and in the overall scheme of things, right? I mean, at least try to expand out, even if you're selling only to Indian defense, try to expand out at least to all the three modalities, maybe police force, if you're doing security surveillance, try to see what aspects, if you can broaden it up, that would be my advice. Otherwise, it becomes a single customer, way too risk. And the timelines it takes and so forth to close things. You got to do a winter trial, a summer trial, right? Extension, 3-4 years. So you need to have enough amount of capital kind of in your kitty, right? But obviously, it's a stark difference from when I was doing things as, trying to sell to defense versus now.
Thanks, Som, for that broad perspective of how things are changing now, and for that very useful tip of look at dual use technologies. How about you, Suri? What are some of your thoughts on defense and any ideas, tips for startups here on how to approach it?
Yeah, no, I agree with Som, because actually, we have made. See, we had not invested in any drone startups for about 5 years. Okay, and suddenly we did 2 of them. One of the reasons also was because of the change in government policy. But at the same time, yes, I completely agree with Som that you cannot be a defense-only startup, right? So, and actually, I have even talked to some of the defense folks. Even they agree that they cannot, actually, startups cannot survive by just selling to defense. So they also want startups which actually are doing the dual, like basically use case in defense, but also use cases outside defense. Okay, so and both of our drone startups actually do that. Okay, and some of the ways to get to the defense is IDEX program is one. There is enough information; people can take a look at it, and also. Even for cybersecurity startups, there is this DSCI, which kind of actually incubates cybersecurity startups and helps them out both with the defense. Especially, like they will give you specs for what is needed for the defense, but they also allow you to sell to others. But they need something specific for defense. Okay, so I think as Shom mentioned, it's a huge change from where it was. But okay, time will prove. I mean, at least like. A lot of startups are doing defense, are engaging with defense through IDEX. So that's where it is today.
Thanks, Suri, for also bringing up cyber security. I didn't have that down in my notes, but I'm adding that now. Let's turn to Vishnu now. Vishnu, you have a global view, I guess, through Special Invest on different sectors, maybe in different parts of the world. Where's India and what can startups do to get into this space?
Sure. See, just to make it very clear, historically B2G companies have been an anathema for VCs across the world when you depend solely on government for your revenue. That's changing globally. Also, there are defense tech focused startups as such. India in the last few years has been extremely, as Surya sir was saying, it has been doing really well in promoting indigenous innovations in that focused on defense space. And IDEX challenges have been super useful in that regard. So are all startups applying to IDEX challenges? Can they be categorized as defense tech? I don't know. See, if our narrow definition of defense tech is offense and defense in the and weapons or like surveillance kind of thing. If you keep that as the general broad lens, we have not invested in any defense tech startups. But Galaxy, Inspacity have all won. These are our portfolio companies from the space tech thing. They have all won IDEX challenges. They have money coming in, and IDEX gives good amount of capital. And they have this equity grant matching program, which is also good incentive for startups to startups with great technologies to go out and convince private investors also to come in and invest in them. So in a way, there might be some defense companies in my portfolio by a broader definition, but we have not invested in anything who are just solely doing catering to the armed forces alone. Largely speaking, what we have seen is that the government push has been incredibly supportive for startups coming up with innovative technologies to get some validation, get some non-dilutive capital, which is very crucial for deep tech startups at the early stages, and equally beneficial for the investors as well. I mean, I give 1.5 million, and if government is matching 1.5 million, I get double the money for my $1, right? So it's definitely useful for us as well, and validation as well. Some there are Navy, all different parts of the armed forces. There's this technical evaluation, and there is validation coming in as well. So largely speaking, as Som sir was saying that defense tech is getting heated up. We are seeing defense focused funds coming in. I've attended a couple of Indo-US defense conferences specifically focused on startups and how that exchange knowledge and innovation exchange can happen. But largely, if you look into the state of the defense tech innovation in India, it is still very nascent. We are nowhere close to compare to US, Israel, or China for that matter. But it's a great start. We will see incredible number of innovations coming in. But at least at this point of stage, if the startups have to raise capital from private entities, what Sir was referring to before, dual use or multiple use cases beyond the B2G or just sole dependency on the government revenues alone might not cut it. Maybe in future, 5 years from now, we might have a different approach we would have a very different conversation. But right now, startups should definitely focus on something, different.
Thanks, Vishnu, and thanks also to Rajesh for flagging off another good resource in the chat window for the startups.
So Madan, can I just intervene out here? Just a quick piece. Now, guys, this is what you are hearing is a version from investors like us, right? But that being said, there are very specific pools of capital. A lot of family offices, very specific pools of capital who understand this business, who have kind of gone in, and they have a much longer time horizon as well, right? So if you have a very good idea and you are kind of gung-ho, getting into kind of the business line, you got the contacts and so forth to go through the trials, right? My suggestion is look for those sources of capital as well. If you don't have a dual use, you have a single very specific use case for Indian defense, right? So I would say that, don't let us kind of sway. Things are changing as well. There are multiple pots of capital available these days.
Well, there are even actually, I would say, groups which actually sell to defense and looking for startups which actually have defense technology. That's another place.
Fantastic.
Madan, just one point. Absolutely right. Like, I mean, VC has a certain pathway that we expect VC investors. I mean, there is, as Somsar was saying, like, there is enough number of alternative pathways we should explore. I mean, startups should definitely look for, that kind of patient capital, different capital pools coming from like, family offices or individuals, HNIs, other institutional investors. VC expect a certain pathway and certain kind of returns and certain multiples to come in. That might not always be possible in the defense space, but you can absolutely build a beautiful business and a successful business.
Fantastic. Thanks for pointing out that this is just one of multiple paths to the market and multiple funding options for the startups out there. Thanks, Rajesh, for flagging the Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers as another place to look at for opportunities for startups. And we're going to come to some of the questions coming up in the chat window, which is how do VCs assess what's going on. Let's just finish the vertical sectors for the moment. We just talked about IDEX and defense. Let's talk about in-space and the space sector now. There's been a lot of attention thanks to Agnikul and other startups for other entrepreneurs to look at the space sector. So my question for the panel now is, what are you guys seeing in the space sector specifically? And maybe some of your thoughts on working with ISRO and InSpace and some of these areas. Do you already have startups in this space? And what would you recommend for startups now looking to expand in this space? Vishnu, you want to start?
For sure. Sorry.
So, Madan, if you had asked me first, I would have said over to special.
Vishnu he is kind of the authority.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add.
That's too much responsibility. And if I had the option, I would have said ask Vishesh, who is our managing partner, and not me.
Okay.
But largely speaking, space tech has been booming in India for quite some time. Agnikul, Skyroot, etc., has done some phenomenal early stage innovations that has allowed allowed this booming sector to shape up and show the world that we can actually build innovative companies. InSpace has been a great innovation to ensure that there is sufficient amount of technology transfer and capital support and joint ventures that comes from the ISRO side as well. And this is a personal opinion, to be very honest. Like for the first few years, we have seen a lot of upstream startups getting built. But if I look into my pipeline currently, a lot of them are focused on the downstream activities, like data and related stuff. But we need to see that we would ideally want to see innovations happening from both ends. And how do we do that is an important question to address. And the other part, if you actually start looking at the startups in the space sector itself and having 5 startups in the space, what we need to also see is we need to start showing investors where are going to come. Few years we can just saying that hey, there is a huge potential, but now it's time to see that ROI or revenue top line starting to, not profits, but at least something starting to getting generated. And that focus on the startup side is also, it's slow. The uptick is slower than what I would have expected from the last few years. There is a space tech WhatsApp group for startups, and one of the discussions that got my attention a lot was, are we really hugely dependent on ISRO? Is there enough innovation happening in India which is not reliant on ISRO? And there were one school of thought which has said that We can't do that. It's only over time that will happen. ISRO has to be there. And to be honest, as an investor, ISRO's validation is one of the biggest things that I need as well, right? Like, I mean, if I have to invest in a company, but if the sector has to truly bloom and get to its full potential, I think we need to see large number of innovations happening both upstream and downstream, material innovations on the launch side, on the data side, and so on. It's still a very nascent sector. I don't think it will ever become a sector like EVs or like mobility or like climate or something where like many thousands boom up and do it. This nature of the sector is such that we will see like a few hundred startups that will come up, but really I feel the innovation again cyclical, but we are on a down stream right now.
Got it. Thanks. So, Suri, anything to add to the space view?
Yeah, I think I agree with Vishnu. See, I mean, I personally believe that, see, some of these startups in India have done incredible, right, in terms of trying to repeat what ISRO has done as compared to NASA, at trying to do this at one-tenth the cost, one-tenth of the time, and so forth. So that's kind of the DNA. And if you look at multitude of kind of upstream companies in space tech had come up during the go-go days in 2021, right? But they, after the rise in this, got stifled, right? Globally, I'm talking about. But that's probably not the case in India. India startups, again, providing that alternative, right? We got SpaceX on one hand. Can we have a much cheaper alternative which can send over multiple satellites into space at, again, X percentage of the cost? Is it possible? That's the DNA of India. India can do it, right? So this is one, but at the end of the day, Vishnu also talked about downstream applications. So this is where I think, to a certain extent, India's, see, once you have 100,000 satellites in the sky, right? I mean, I don't know who is going to send, how it's going to be sent. So assume the projections are and so forth are all correct. You have 50,000 to 100,000 satellites in space in the next 5-10 years, all of them looking at the Earth at different high resolution. You got spectral cameras, you got thermal cameras, you got vision cameras. Literally, it's surveilling the Earth 24/7, every minute, every second, right? Think about the richness of the data, what you can do with that data. Think about the layers of the middleware layers and so forth, which data can be consumed. It's going to generate a tremendous amount of data, right? That data might actually get commoditized to a certain degree as well, if you have enough satellites in the sky, right? But think about then the verticalized applications you can do with these kind of data on different industry verticals, vision analytics, AI, ML, consume the data from multiple sources and start making intelligent decision making for logistics to climate change and so forth. So multiple opportunities.
That's fantastic. Great to hear that there's so much opportunity over here. My next question now comes back to what Rajesh began our original discussion with, which is the startup challenges. We had, somebody's doing a sticky note out there. Anyway, we began earlier hearing from Rajesh about some of the categories for the VentuRISE challenge. And some of them are smart city, smart grid, battery tracking, AR, VR, anti-drone, defense systems, and so on. What are some of your thoughts or tips on how startups should be looking at some of these? We haven't talked too much about AI, for example. So what are some of your tips to the startups on how to build out a deep tech startup in AI and ML, how to get the talent in place, maybe tracking applications, tracking vehicles, tracking batteries, and so on. So maybe AI and tracking. Any thoughts from our three speakers over here? Soam, you want to start? Or Suri? Suri looks ready to start. Suri, over to you.
See, the biggest problem in actually like deep tech is actually the talent, right? Basically, like you may not have availability of talent. You may have to actually get people, train them also. Like many times, actually, like we have invested in a quantum startup which to be announced, but it's not very easy to get talent. Okay, any deep tech for that matter, right? So we have to figure out a way to source, train, and build a team, right? So that's very important. And even some of these drone startups, right? You have to actually look for talent only in very limited places, right? Like IISc, you have to go. Like you have to really like look deeply to get those very good talent, because otherwise you can't build these systems, or you have to come with a research experience or domain. So I believe that's the major challenge.
Great. How about you, Vishnu? Any comments on how startups can gear up for AI tracking, smart grid, those kind of things, part of the challenge?
Is there an echo?
Sorry, Madan, what exactly is your question? Is it the deep tech challenges?
About VentuRISE. The VentuRISE challenge, as Rajesh has pointed out in the beginning of our session today, he said VentuRISE is a program to get startups to compete in certain specific challenge questions and then become eligible for prizes. So some of the ones that are part of the challenge are smart city, AI for smart grids and tracking electrical batteries, AR, VR, anti-defense drone systems, and so on. So are there any tips specific to the VentuRISE challenge? That's the question that has just posed to us. Yeah. So I think we were supposed to see that video, but the video didn't play properly. But in that video, these challenges were mentioned: AI, tracking, AR, VR, defense, and smart grid. So in these 5 areas, are there any comments that you may have?
Madan, was that specifically for AI for smart grid or AI in general?
Yes. Yeah, in general, but some of the applications mentioned in the challenges, one is AI for smart city, one is AI for tracking batteries and so on. Maybe that.
Got it. I mean, I can give my perspective generally how we think about it. I mean, when we look at AI as a space, when it comes to generative AI, we only look into the infrastructure layer. Application layer, a lot of people are doing it, but where do you bring long-term value? We think it's the infrastructure layer. But when it comes to AI-based application, there is quite a bit of application solutions that can be built. I think it's important for the startups who are building to see the market opportunity and potential. You can just pick up anything and say that, hey, I can apply AI over here, or for the sake of it, just adding the thing AI enabled startup, which is a very common description, right? I have gotten solution which has blockchain backed, AI enabled, like all the buzzwords. It's much beyond than the buzzwords. See, there is another colleague of mine who exclusively look into generative AI related stuff. When it comes to vertical AI, I have done a deal from my, our portfolio that was on AI for drug discovery. We invested in this company called Pepris, which added an AI-based drug development, drug discovery layer right before the lab testing starts, which increased the probability of, and they are in the process of licensing out a drug for muscular dystrophy. This would be the first of its kind AI-based drug, licensing out from India. But specifically focusing on the thematic areas that we are talking today, AI-based AI for smart grids is an incredible opportunity. India is one of the least digitalized grid systems in India. Like we went for mobile systems where we kind of skip the whole landlines. Our digitalized grid is also going to be smart, or at least that's a vision to go forward with. So, and AI needs to play a very important role in that. The problem though, when you're focusing on AI based grid system solutions, is that there's something which we discussed when we said defense. We are going to deal with discoms and transcoms, which are 60% of discoms in India are public utilities. We have to deal with companies which are in the government space. So the 40% we know the state of fiscal state of many discoms in the country. They don't have enough capital. See, it's a dual problem in front of the government and public utilities. See, they need these kind of like efficient mechanisms, digitalization to turn these discoms around into profitable entities. But then at the same time, they need private sector support for it. And where do you pay for that? So it's a very tough place for an investor to come and invest. But from an opportunity perspective, there is definitely government push to do this, especially with respect to preventing theft, making sure that we are counting every electron that is consumed from the generation point to the time point of consumption. How do you track every electron and make sure that we get the enough value out of it? Forecasting about the demand response within the systems, especially with EVs getting integrated, solar at homes and outside getting integrated into the grid. The grid is becoming like a very complex entity other than just the linear form. It's back and forth and back and forth. And when such things happen, data needs to be captured. It starts from basic IoTs that needs to be installed in the critical points on the grid systems, to using that data to do predictions, avoiding errors, etc. So the opportunity is huge. That I will give it to everybody. But then how do you monetize it? How do you build a company out of it? We need to be more creative about it. We need to find alternative sources of revenue as well in doing it. We can't rely on the 40% of the private sector discoms that are there in the country. There are ways to discuss that. We can go into that detail, but as such, AI for grid is an incredible opportunity. This might be, this is a huge area for interest for me, but unfortunately, there are some realities also the startups will have to deal with.
Very well said, Vishnu. The opportunity is huge. The need is immediate and pressing. It's a long-term need also, but we're going to start somewhere with the government agencies who are quite cash-strapped themselves. Suri, anything to add in terms of some of the things Rajesh?
So, Madan, I think there will be some challenges, as Vishnu was pointing out. I'm just looking at that list for VentuRISE. See, IoT, AI-based smart grid, AI-based smart water management, and all of these aspects. See, AI needs a lot of data. I guess the first question which we need to answer is, where is this data going to come from to even build and train these AI models? What it needs first is the digitization aspect, right? So the data needs to be available. For that, it needs to be digitized. Now, as far as I know, the distribution grid and so forth, the water management system, still it's manual note taking and reading taking, right? So we got a long way to go. If we are talking from an AI standpoint, right? The digitization has to have happen first. The collection has to happen next. Then only the AI can come in, because this AI needs a boatload of data. Okay, so I'm actually much more interested in looking for the AR/VR aspect in military domain. That's definitely in the manufacturing, skilling, defense domain. This could be a game changer. Anti-drone systems is the need for that hour, and I think I saw a couple of companies in that space where just a vision-based or radar-based independently owned do. You need to now combine, it's going to be a multimodal logistics aspect, combining all forms of analysis to figure out if there is a drone, right? And then how do you, it's not the anti-drone, just the systems. How do you ensure that this drone is made incapable? So the last two, actually, I'm much more battery tracking system, AI vision system for inspection. That piece is happening in our Time Metrics Forum. We probably have close to 100 vision analytics companies. More than half of them are some kind of defect detection and so forth. The challenge for those kind of systems is, as you go from one type of product to another, as you go from one line to another, the entire vision system needs to be, retrained, right? Which becomes almost like every time it's a new project. So as VCs, we look for what is the least friction to scale. Okay, so that's what we will keep you guys asking, right? what are the frictions to scale? What are the touch points? Do you have to repeat this process ever again, or you just build once and sell it to 1,000 customers, right? As is. So those are the considerations that come up anytime you're doing kind of hardware, ESDM, selling to the defense. I think the customization aspect kills you, right? So that's something to worry about.
Thanks, so we have about 15 minutes left before we wrap up this panel discussion and hand it over back to the VentuRISE team to talk about the VentuRISE challenges and the programs and the steps, eligibility criteria, and so on. So I want to bring up some of the questions that have come up in the chat window, and one of them is about smart capital, talent, and all that stuff. A lot of you have mentioned that it takes much more than money to succeed. You need mentors, you need connects in the industry. So can you share with the startups in the audience what specific kinds of help you offer to startups in this space? Of course, capital is a big part, but can you help the startups with this big list I mentioned to you: mentorship, connects, getting talent, getting lawyers on board, filing IP, and all that stuff. So Vishnu, you want to start? What do you bring? What does smart capital mean for startups in your portfolio?
Yeah, I don't want to be under any pretension. The capital is the biggest value add any venture capital firm can come and bring onto the table. Everything else, everything else is supplementary. But that being said, over time we have developed the networks, the skill sets, experience working with various deep science startups, and we offer those kind of supports to startups as well. Usually when I pitch myself to the startups, we always make sure that there is a 10-15 minutes dedicated to pitch special to the startups, like they are pitching to us as well. And one of the things that I usually say is that, hey, we promise you that if you are on the cap table, we will be the last one to leave your ship if there is a rainy day that happens and the ship collapses. So we will be there with the startups on the rainy day, and the rainy days will definitely come. And that's the biggest promise we give them. When special comes on to startups, when we invest, the signal that we send to the startup, send to the market, we are a pre-seed seed investor, very early stage. The signal we typically send, especially for a deep tech, deep science startup, is that there is a certain science risk that is associated with every deep tech startup. And we are underwriting that science risk for the next stage of investor. So if the next stage of investor is coming to invest in us, what we are saying is that, hey, we have taken care of majority of the science risk. There is a certain engineering and scaling risk that is associated. That's what you need to look into. And when our startups grow into the market, that's what we are trying to solve. It's a slightly different perspective than how we traditionally look at the non-deep tech startups or the regular startups at a seed level to a Series A level. But that risk is, underwriting that risk is a big value add we do. Additionally, of course, a lot of things are on table. It depends on, there are startup founders who have asked me to interview their senior level candidates just to give them the promise that, hey, there is enough financial backing that is coming in. I come from a strategy consulting background. Quite often, I go to, I don't like the idea of working on Saturdays, but a lot of startups in India work on Saturdays. So, and that is a time when founders are typically a little more freer to think about things. So we do brainstorming sessions, strategic, vision, strategy, brainstorming, etc., on a monthly or a regular basis. Deep tech, deep science startups, of course, need like support from the industry and experts. So whatever it is, the good fortune that we have is that our LPs are mostly consisting of HNIs and family offices in India. 98% are just Indian funds and family offices and HNIs, which gives us good access to almost every boardroom in the country. And that kind of is the biggest thing for a B2B startup, especially deep science startup, right? We can give them that access if they want it, help them with that, and provide them that support. And then everything that you said, IP, recruiting, etc., we have some sort of offering on the table, but all of those are supplementary, and that is on. We present it to the startups, we talk to them very regularly, but many times it is also on the founder to seek out and ask for it and get the support. And when we don't have that support, we try out of our way to go and help them and find that from our networks.
Thanks, Vishnu. How about you, Som and Suri? Som, you want to share some of the things that you helped startup with in the long journey?
Yeah, I think Vishnu covered most of it. See, at the end of the day, uh, again, we are kind of operator turned VCs. So we love to roll up the sleeve and work with the startup, right? Whatever it takes. Be it kind of strategy discussions, making introductions to partners and customers. I have prepared decks for the next fundraiser as well, right? And hiring decisions, strategy discussions, and so forth. And see, at the end of the day, I'll tell you kind of the issues, problems. I mean, we have an extensive network both in US and India through our LPs, through our investors. But the challenge is when I had like a handful of 3-4 companies, I was daily kind of working with the founders. But what happens when once you have 10, 15, 20 companies, right? Our attention and so forth gets split up across multiple startups. And I think tend to focus on the ones who really need our help. Some founders, I mean, they see, but as Vishnu mentioned, Saturdays, Sundays are perfect time for the founders to catch up with the VCs. We are available for them. I have had calls, late night calls, but some of them are emergency situations, late night calls as well. Okay. But overall, I would essentially say that the founder needs to reach out, exactly need to understand and ask to the investors, ask to the board, hey, I'm really good at these few things. These areas I really need help, right? Be open up. The investment has happened, not before, right? Always. So investment has happened. Have a frank, open discussion with the board, with your investors. Hey, these are the areas that I'm well covered. These are the areas I really need help. I really need connect, and go in and ask, demand these pieces. Otherwise, kind of our attention and so forth goes to the most needy startup as well from time to time.
Fantastic, great. How about you, Suri? Any comments on what the best?
Maybe I can just summarize actually. I keep telling that the real work starts after investment.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's how we see it. We also try to prioritize based on and the needs are very different. So some need let's assume somebody who comes from very high research background, they may need help in building product. Okay, then like basically more of not like building product, but like how do you prioritize what to build, things like that, right? And some of them need how to tell a good story, right? So things like that. So it's because they're all tech guys, okay? So how do you see from a customer's perspective and things like that? And some of them need, I would say, business model, right? So they come from a different world. So business model is where maybe they need help. So it varies. It's like a personalized, I would say, help they will need. So, and again, like we have to prioritize. We have to basically identify, hey, these are the top 5 to 8 startups which we can manage and which need help at this point of time. It's a moving window, right? So, and when they are slightly ahead of the game, they will come back and ask us like when they need help.
Great. Thanks, Suri. I can see some questions in the chat window. I want to wrap up.
Madan, can I just take one sentence to just reiterate on what Suri sir was saying? Storytelling is, if I have to pick one skill set, storytelling is the single most important skill set.
Absolutely.
Any founder, especially from India, should focus on working. Be it very technical. I mean, they definitely, deep tech founders definitely need to focus on, but across the board, storytelling, great storytelling, succinct way of keep getting your point to your audience is a skill set that can be learned, but founders need to invest time on. And it's not just for investors, but like you have to sell, you have to say stories, you have to form partnerships, you have to say stories, tell stories, you have to raise money, you have to tell stories. And that's the most underrated skill set that Indian founders need to put a lot of effort in developing.
See, every founder needs to be a salesman, a fantastic salesman. Right?
And every great salesman tells great stories, right?
Exactly.
That is one level, and the other thing is, I would request all the founders to come with one sentence story. Actually, that is actually like then actually it condenses everything, and you focus. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for those good tips. Anybody wants to know more information on storytelling, you can connect with me. I'll put my LinkedIn profile over there in the chat window. There were also a number of startups saying, I've got this product, I want to pitch to you guys. How do I connect with you? So I guess they should connect with you all on LinkedIn, right? They can go to each of your profiles and connect with you. If you accept it, they can pitch on LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn is fine.
I believe that it should be as frictionless as possible. So you have an open calendar where they can directly put time on my calendar. My phone number is there, my email is there, and LinkedIn messages are there. So I don't even 30-minute conversations. I don't even ask why you are putting. Every day there is a 30-minute slot available. So.
Fantastic. Thank you. How about you, Suri? LinkedIn is the best.
LinkedIn is good. Yeah. Or I can give my email address. They can send an email to me. It's suri@ideaspringcap.com. Maybe let me just type.
Yeah, just type it. Your LinkedIn profiles or any other calendar, whatever invites, please just type it in the chat window. We're almost out of time. I just want to ask one of you, any of you, the last question which has come in, which is a lot of these are journeys which take a long time to succeed for the startups. So along the way, are there any ways for them to make some quick money before they get to the final kind of product? So this is a great question. I get this a lot of time, which is, can we do something in the short term to make some quick money so that we have some money in the coffers to last for the long journey? Or should we just stay ruthlessly focused on the end goal? That's a great question. I hear a lot from many founders. I'd love to hear from each of you. What are your tips on, should we do something on the side to make money while we wait for the big prize to come? So Vishnu, what do you say?
See,
Sorry.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so go ahead.
So Suri, there are two schools of thought out here, right? One is, once you get some amount of investment, focusing on the other related aspects and so forth is just distraction, right? But at the end of the day, we have all kind of worn entrepreneur shoes as well. You have to survive first to even get there. Okay, and to survive, if the things need to be bootstrapped, if things need to be built, so be it. So the question essentially becomes, at what stage of development, at what stage of fundraising are you at? If you are bootstrapped, if you haven't raised money, I think every investor will understand why you are doing some additional services and so forth to keep kind of the cash flow going, right? We completely understand. But if after fundraising and so forth, you continue to do that, that becomes a distraction unless and until the cash flow is not there, right? You could have maybe a separate team focusing on it and so forth to get the cash in, but that becomes kind of a challenge.
Suri, Vishnu?
No, Shom said it all. I don't want to waste it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Vishnu, in that case...
it's the same thing, yeah.
Same thing, good. In that case, thank you all so much for joining us. This has been a fantastic 1 or 15-minute mini masterclass on what's happening in the different sectors, what's the investor outlook, and how you should plan your journeys in the long road to success up ahead. I want to thank once again Vinay and Rajesh for setting up this panel discussion, and back to you, Rajesh and Vinay, to tell the audience a bit more about VentuRISE, eligibility criteria, and the whole exciting journey to TGS 2024 in December. Vinay?
Fantastic. Thank you all for the fantastic session. As you said, it's a mini masterclass. I'm sure there were a lot of takeaways for founders. We intend to do many more of these sessions. Again, a lot of thanks, and thanks to the audience, to the investors, to the moderator. So what we're going to do now is we're going to keep it a little open. Those of you who have questions, I'm going to play a quick video and also share on how many of you could contribute to VentuRISE as a founder, as an enabler. So we'll be happy to have as many of you to be super fans of VentuRISE and to help us reach out to many more in the ecosystem. So we have a few more days for the application, and what we'll also do is we will go through the use cases. I hope all of you are aware of the use cases that we have. Let me just do a quick screen share, and I'm also going to stop the recording. So if you have any sort of question, we will